Well, it is Connection Sunday, and I love connections. I love connecting with people, and I love finding unexpected connections out in the wild. You know, like when you talk to somebody and you find out this connection that you have that you didn't realize that you had before. And, you know, you sort of say it's a small world, but you really do. You find these things that happen that you couldn't even believe. And I actually had a hard time figuring out which story I was going to tell because I love them so much, and I've started writing them down because I like telling them. The most recent one that I'm going to share happened in September. So Lakelight Institute, which is part of Christ Church, this past fall, we did a number of these talks. Mike Woodruff went around to a number of cities where we just sort of happened to have people that have Christ Church connections. And the first one was in Austin, Texas, and that's where I'm from. I grew up in Austin, and I'm connected to a few of those folks. In fact, the host family for this particular event in Austin used to attend Christ Church, and I'm very close with them, and they agreed to host. And so Mike invited me to come and sort of be the host for the event. So, you know, twist my arm, make me go to my hometown. Okay, fine, I'll go. So I go down there. My daughter Kayla, my oldest daughter Kayla, lives there. She's 25. She's a social worker in Austin, and she attends a church there, and she's a leader of a group of freshman girls at a church in Austin as well. So she came to the event, joined us for this event in Austin, and there was one couple that signed up for this event, this Lakelight talk that Mike was doing, and I didn't know who they were, Mike didn't know who they were, none of us knew who they were. So we sort of had this mystery couple show up, and we're going around and finding out who they are and why they're there. And this couple said, yeah, we don't know any of you, but the husband said, well, I'm college roommates with someone who's been at Christ Church for the last 15 years, and when he heard that there was this event coming to my town, he said, you gotta go. So he showed up, which is like, says a lot about their friendship. I don't know that I would just show up to some random home on a Monday night, you know, don't know anybody, don't know who this pastor guy is, but that's why he was there. And so that's a lot of fun. So I'm talking with this couple, and I know a lot of churches in Austin. So I said, you guys involved in a church here? Yes, we are. We go to Austin Stone. Okay, they've got a number of campuses. Which campus do you go to? Well, we go to the St. John's campus. And I'm thinking, oh, that's the campus where my daughter goes. And they had mentioned that they had some kids in high school. I said, what year is your daughter? Oh, she's a freshman. I said, well, is she involved in the youth group? And they said, yep, she's very involved in the youth group. And I said, see that girl standing over there? That's my daughter. She's your daughter's youth group leader at your church. And they were like, what? Are you kidding me? So they had not met Kayla. They come over, they meet Kayla. And, you know, I'm just like blown away that this connection is there. And they opened up to us later and said, you know, we've actually had it's been difficult to get our daughter plugged in at this group. I texted some friends saying, I don't know what to do. Do we keep making her go? She really doesn't want to go. She's having a hard time connecting. And I was able to sort of say, look, you know, I'm going to brag on my daughter, but if there was anybody who can help get your daughter connected, it's the kid. Some of you don't know this. I was a youth pastor here for 25 years. This young woman literally grew up her entire life around youth groups. She went to youth group herself. She is a social worker. Like this, if there's ever somebody who can help get your daughter connected, it's her. So we all sort of left that meeting feeling like, okay, this wasn't an accident. Now we know why it is that they were there, more than just to hear that talk. So connections are fun. And the reason why we're looking at this today is that a huge part of being in a church is supposed to be connections to one another. And there are people who show up at church. I know them. They've said to me, yeah, we attended your church for about a year, and we would show up and we would sit in the back row, and then we kind of looked around and we didn't know anybody, so we walked out. And it would crush me to hear that. And so every so often we We do things like make you put on a name tag. And even today, we are going to intentionally end the service a little bit early. And those of you with the young kids, you don't have to go rush off and grab your kids in hopes of that there might be some connections made. But before we get to all of that, we're going to look at what the early church looked like and what community and connection looked like there, and see what we can learn from that. So community is, it was largely something of a Christian word for a long time. And one of the interesting things about COVID is that people started talking about community. Like everybody was saying, yeah, we being alone doesn't work. We need people. And we absolutely feel that way at Christ Church. But we're going to look, if you want to turn, the passage is going to be on the screen, but you can turn in your own Bibles, pew Bibles if you'd like to, or on your phones, from Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now, the context here is a fun one. If you have not read the beginning of Acts chapter 2, I don't have time to tell you all of the details, but I encourage you to read it. It is the story about Pentecost, and I think we can sometimes pass over. If we're familiar with the story of Pentecost, we sort of go, yeah, Pentecost happened. But we need to make sure we understand just how insane Pentecost was. The only thing I remember about Pentecost being a little kid is that Pentecost is known as the birthday of the church. So in the church I grew up in Austin, they would always have birthday cake on Pentecost Sunday. So that's a win. That was a win for me as a kid. But I didn't really understand anything else about Pentecost. So the technical term for what happened on the day of Pentecost is that some crazy-ish went down. Tongues of fire we don't even really know what that means. There was sort of nothing else like it that happened recorded, but tongues of fire descend into the room. People from different countries are there, but each of them is hearing language being spoken in their own language. Just some absolutely crazy, miraculous stuff. Then Peter gets up and preaches a sermon. He has to start his sermon by saying, look, I know that everyone here looks to be drunk, but it's 9 a.m. We're not going to get drunk yet, he says, right? But that's how crazy the room was. And that's how he started the sermon. And then by the end of his sermon, a couple thousand people come to faith. This massive explosion of gospel energy. And then what happens? Well, then what happens is a massive explosion of gospel generosity and selflessness. This move of God, in turn, becomes the catalyst for the beginning of the church, which is why we celebrate it as the church's birthday. But for the remainder of my time this morning, we're going to look back to our passage at the end of Acts chapter 2, 5 implications from this passage. The first one is this: godly community has God as the center and focus of everything. It has God as the center and focus of everything. You might hear me say this, and you're like, yeah, he's the pastor, he has to say that. But we miss this very easily in community. There was a lecture down at Trinity Seminary, which is where I went to seminary. It was someone who I had never heard before. I was familiar with his name. It was a professor and author named Wynne Collier. And somebody said, there's a free lunch and there's a lecture. And so I said, free lunch? Oh, okay. You see a pattern, the birthday cake, the free lunch. Anyway. Here was, his name was Wynne Collier. Wynne's main point was this. He said, and this is what he said verbatim. I typed it out on my phone. He said, the point of being a pastor which was a good opening. He had my attention, right? The point of being a pastor is God. That was his point. And I type it out on my phone, and I was like, I don't think that's a sentence. I think there needs to be like a verb in the second half of that sentence. Something is missing. The point of being a pastor is God. Well, and then I thought about it, and I thought, no, I like it. Pastors are really good at being professional Christians. Some of you in this room are too. You've been doing this a long time. We can easily make the point of the Christian life to be about this thing or that thing, the thing that we're really upset about or the thing that we're really focused on. It can be about the poor, which is a great cause. It can be about fighting injustice, which is a great cause. It can be about sharing the gospel with the lost, which is a great cause. But it first has to be about God, about beholding him, about worshiping him as he is, about stopping our activities to acknowledge that he is the first and the last, the beginning and the end. He doesn't report to us, we report to him. He doesn't need us on his team, but he invites us into relationship with him. Our stories only make sense to the extent that they have him at the center of all stories. Wynne went on to talk about monks at a certain point in human history. I don't remember which part, but I hadn't really thought about the fact that monks were not pastors. They pray, they do monk things. And there was a time when they needed more pastors, and they went to the monks and like, guys, we need more pastors. And the monks said they were so afraid of the magnetism of social power that they didn't want to become pastors. They were afraid that they'd lose the simple passion and devotion that they had for God. He made the comment at the lecture. He said, I never heard someone say, I thought about being a pastor, but I love God too much, which got a chuckle from all of us. Any community can lose its way if they don't put God at the center of all things. And the new year is a great time for each of us to ask ourselves the question, is God at the center of all we're doing? Because it only works that way. So, point number one, God at the center. Point number two is that godly community exhibits radical generosity. And we see this in verses 44 and 45. This is not just sort of, I'm gonna see if I've got some money in my wallet and I'll happen to give it. But these people sold things that they had and gave to the people as they had need. And this is a very high bar as we see it displayed in this passage. But I want to go back to something. It really has a lot to do with point one. I don't think it was that hard because these people felt so transformed by God, so cared for by God that they thought, well, if I have extra and someone doesn't have enough, what am I doing with this extra? If I've got 2 coats and he doesn't have 1, yeah, she could take my coat. If I have this big parcel of land and this one doesn't have anybody, we'll sell that and give it to them. And if it means that I don't have enough because I got rid of too much stuff, well, somebody else is gonna come along later and make sure that I'm taken care of. They just had this sense that God had them, and so why wouldn't they be generous with other people? And I wanna just give a quick commercial for it's part of our church that we don't talk about very much. It's a benevolence fund called St. James. I think it's a tough name for this organization, St. James, because they're like, St. James, what is that, the church up the road? What is that, St. James? They didn't ask my opinion. So, it's called St. James. It's based on the passage from the book of James, where it says you can't just say keep warm and well fed. You have to do something. And so it's this incredible group of volunteers in our church who very quietly hear about needs, mostly from in the church. People give to this fund, and they make sure that the people in our church are cared for. And it's been going on from the beginning. If you we need to know about it. We don't find time to talk about it, so I'm just talk about it here. It's happening here. If this is something you want to find out more about ways to give, if you know of a need in the congregation that isn't being met, we have a group to take care of it. It's incredible. Having been a pastor here for a long time, to know that this group of people comes in and to hear about the generosity and how God has used this group is really amazing. It's God at work in our midst. But there can be a lot of guilt I don't think there needs to be guilt of, I'm not giving enough and whatever. Give yourself fully to God, and then trust that he will provide for you. And we can be generous because of how much God has taken care of us. So godly community exhibits radical generosity. Point 3 is that godly community places an emphasis on big and small meetings. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this point, but what's interesting is that we see this commitment is twofold. They would spend time as a large group together in the temple courts, and then they would go into one another's homes. So, and I know church looks different for different people, but there is something essential about being together as the gathered body of believers. There's something powerful in a large group, and I know there's some of you joining us online, which is wonderful, and especially some of you are traveling, and so this is a great way for you to stay connected to Christ Church. But if there are some of you out there that you're like, yeah, I know I need to get back to church, we kind of got out of the rhythm with COVID. Maybe you're looking for a sign, so that's fine. Well, maybe this will there's your sign. Come back to church. All right, that's point 3. Which leads me to point 4. Godly community gets vulnerable. The end of verse 46 says, they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. What happens when you enter into another person's home and have a meal with them? Walls come down. You walk in as acquaintances and you leave as friends. You open yourself up to someone. They open themselves up to you. This is really at the heart of why we want to encourage each person who is a part of Christ Church to be in a small group. It's why small groups are part of our youngest ministries here, starting in Lighthouse, continuing through Fleet 45, which is for 4th and 5th graders, Cove, which is 6th through 8th graders, Shig, high school, young adults ministry. It's all small groups based because we want people to be in community. We want them to come, yes, we want them to worship and to hear a message, but we also want them to share their lives, to have this sense of breaking bread, having glad and sincere hearts with one another. The early church set the example. We want to follow it. And this came alive to me recently when I listened to a somewhat famous song by a very famous lyricist. So I have a theater background. I realized the last sermon I gave, I also talked about musical theater. Sorry, guys. That's just, the cliche. If I'm not talking about the Cubs, I'm talking about musical theater. Sorry. But Stephen Sondheim, considered by many to be one of the greatest lyricists of all time, perhaps the greatest, died a couple of years ago. He wrote the lyrics to West Side Story. He wrote Into the Woods, Sweeney Todd, a number of many, many musicals. One of the most beloved songs by musical theater nerds is called Being Alive. And I recently heard that Barbra Streisand does a version of it. Maybe some of you have heard that one, but it's from a musical called Company. And the word company in the title actually has to do, it could have been called Community. It was written in 1970, and it was company in the way that you talk about having company over. It's about this community, this guy Bobby, who is 35, it starts on his 35th birthday. He's single, all of his friends are married, and it's sort of this exploration of his life, and does he want to get married, and sort of what is the point of all of that, and it sort of culminates at the end of the musical with this song called Being Alive, which I'm not gonna make you listen to. You can look it up later if you'd like to. But in the first half of the song, he sort of asks, what's the point of marriage? He sort of mocks it. He says, someone to hold you too close, someone to hurt you too deep, someone to sit in your chair and ruin your sleep and make you aware of being alive. And then the shift happens in the second half of the song. And then it almost becomes a prayer. He says, somebody hold me too close. Somebody force me to care. Somebody make me come through. I'll always be there as frightened as you of being alive. And then at the end of the song, he says, but alone is alone, not alive. And this song, it's not actually about marriage. It's about the need to be in community. There are a lot of people who have everything physically that they need, but they're alone. And alone is alone, but it's not alive. It's not what we were made for. The thing is that when things are going well, you don't always notice it, right? You're sort of, I'm good. I'm doing fine. But when a crisis hits, at that point, it's too late to find a community that will care for you. It's one of those things that you can't order on Amazon, right? I checked this morning, they don't have Caring Small Group available on their website. Bezos is probably still looking into that, but I don't think it's gonna happen. That's something that you have to say, I wanna invest in this now. And if a crisis happens to hit, they're there for you. Now, there are a ton of obstacles to this. And probably the biggest one is couples with young kids. Some of you are just like, look, there's just no chance. There's no chance. And there might be seasons where it's difficult. Maybe you sort of say, okay, well, maybe at some point. But the sacrifice to be in community is worth it. I also want to say, set up expectations that small groups are not little oases of utopian bliss, okay? Small groups are going to have conflict just like every other part of life. There's gonna be conflict. In fact, if you're really being honest with one another and if you're getting close, you should expect conflict, just like any good relationship that you're with. I mean, and if you're in a small group with people like me who talk too much and have strong opinions, I mean, good luck. Good luck. Please pray for my small group, they have to put up with me. But it ends up being like a good marriage where you have to work through conflict. That's a different sermon entirely, but you have to, when things arise, have good communication to say, hey, when you said that thing, I don't think you meant to offend me, but it really hurt my feelings. And then what ends up happening is that the relationship actually gets stronger if you're willing to do that. So some of you may have been burned by bad experiences with small groups and you're like, yeah, I'm never doing that again. My encouragement to you would be to say, try again, because this is what being alive is really about. It's not about stuff. It's not about status. It's not about power. It's about knowing others and being known. It's about loving God and allowing God to love us. A God who transforms us and then gives us every day to live in this world, to be alive in it. Every day really is a gift, and we are not meant to do it alone. That's point 4, is that community, godly community, gets vulnerable. Finally, point 5 is that godly community grows. This is another one that isn't about us. It's really about God. In verse 47, the passage it says, the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. So as this passion for God grows, and other people see it, and they want to be a part of it too. It can't stay contained. Others are looking for it. They're hungering for it. Even people who are not a part of the church see this kind of community lived out. They want to be a part of it. The church is one of the few institutions that exists for the benefit of its non-members, right? And I've seen this happen in youth ministry many times over the years. Young people who care for each other. And then people that don't have that kind of community come in, they're loved, accepted, the group grows. Parents of those kids show up and they say, wow, I have never seen this before. I want to be a part of this. And God adds to the number. So what is the takeaway? Well, the first takeaway I want to point back to is that we have to start with God. He has to be the focus of our lives. Understanding that he acted first. He, through his generosity, came through his son Jesus to live, to die in our place. We give our lives to him. And when we are aware of that gift that he gives us, that love that he has for us overflows into the community around us. And put simply, if you're not in a community, we want you to be a part of one. So start with parents. If your kids aren't in a group, if they're not a part of one of the children's ministries, the youth ministries, which our middle school ministry has Sunday mornings, but also Wednesday nights. It's a great opportunity. They've got an 8th grade. It's not too late to join. You can join halfway through the year. 8th grade confirmation class called Compass. Small groups is a big part of that every other Sunday night. High school ministries tonight. Show up tonight. High school ministries happening in 8-1, 6 to 8 p.m. Young adults is a group of, if you're between the ages of 18 and 30 something, Monday nights, there's a really great group of single and married young adults meeting here Monday nights, 6:30. You can come tomorrow night. You can come the next Monday night. If you're a guy and you're like, yeah, I'm kind of interested in being around some other guys, show up as you heard before, Friday morning at 6:30. Ladies, Wednesday night, you can go to Judy's house at 6:30 p.m. If you don't know where to start, we're actually having an open small group that's going to start tomorrow night here at 6:30, led by Jamie Morrison. That's happening. You can anybody can show up and just say, I don't know what this is all about. I don't know any. I'd like to get to know some more people. Tomorrow night, if tomorrow night doesn't work, you can come. We'll be meeting for the next 6 weeks. That's an open small group. And if you'd like more, you can stop at the table in the lobby today and find out more about being in a small group. But there is something that you will need to do. You'll need to take a step to be involved. The last group that I'll mention is there may be some people who are ready to lead a group. Maybe you've led one before and you're ready. Maybe you're sort of like, I probably could. I'm just nervous about it. You don't have to be a spiritual powerhouse to lead. You need to be available, and you need to be someone who's ready to raise your hand and faithful. You want to just show up and lead. Talk to me in the lobby today. We're looking for more leaders to lead groups. We are, as mentioned before, concluding just a little bit early on purpose, so that those of you, especially those of you who have kids, you don't have to run and get your kids. You have until 10 after to go pick them up, because we want you to take a little bit of time, maybe around a donut or a celery stick, to talk to somebody. I realize this is an introvert's nightmare. I do apologize for that. No one's gonna grab you if you wanna run out of here and rip off that name tag and say, nobody talk to me. That's fine, I get it. We're gonna leave you alone. But even my friends in the O1, they're gonna come down into the lobby to be a part of Connection Sunday as well. You guys be nice to my friends in the O1, okay? All right, they're gonna be nice to you, so come on down. If you're very well connected, if you've been here a while, you're in a group, my encouragement to you is to find someone you haven't met before and introduce yourself. Ask them how long they've been coming. Maybe find a connection that you didn't know that you had. Take some time to do that, to linger today in the lobby and see what God does. Down in Austin, when we realized why this couple was there, that God, it just didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like something that God had done. We were in awe of God. It wasn't a sign and wonder similar to Acts 2. There were no tongues of fire, but it was a sign. We were in wonder that God would have brought this couple with their daughter's small group leader who was struggling. I mean, we were in awe of God. We knew that God was at work. And that's our hope for each of you here, that you know that God is at work in your lives, in and through the connections that you find here. Let's pray. Lord, we want to be in awe of you. Help us to quiet ourselves as we begin this new year, to perhaps reorient our hearts so that they are bound up with yours. And may out of that love that we have for you, the love that we feel from you, God, would you help us to commit to one another? Do your work, Lord, in us, and then do your work through us, we pray. Amen.